My dad said it like it was nothing. It's just a reunion, Vader, you're being dramatic. That was the whole explanation I got for why my name was not on the guest list for my own brother's welcome home party. 21 years old, a full-time college student, his actual blood daughter, and I was not invited, not forgotten, not accidentally left out, just not included. And when I stopped waiting for an apology that was never coming and booked a ski trip to Aspen instead, my family lost their minds. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started. Before you hear the rest of this story, I want to know where you are watching from right now. Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you have ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, hit that like button because this one is going to hit close to home. Subscribe if you are new here because this story is only the beginning and I have a lot more to share with you. So, my family. I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, about 35 miles west of Chicago. My dad, Gareth, worked as a structural engineer. He was the kind of man who measured everything, including his children. Not in a cruel, obvious way. More like a slow, quiet way that you do not notice until you are 15 and you realize that every single trophy in the living room belongs to your brother, and you cannot remember the last time your dad asked how school was going. My mom, Lorraine, did not work outside the house. She was home every day, which sounds like it should mean she was present, but presence and attention are not the same thing. Lorraine organized her entire life around my brother Emeric. His schedule, his meals, his moods. She knew every name on his football team. She knew his coaches by first name. She showed up to every single one of his games with a handmade sign. Emeric is 6 years older than me. He is not a bad person. I want to be clear about that from the start because this story is not about hatting him. It is about what happened when two kids grew up in the same house and only one of them was seen. The first time I really understood what I was dealing with, I was 10 years old. I had asked my parents weeks in advance if I could have a birthday party. Nothing big, just a few girls from my class, some cake, maybe a movie. My dad said yes. My mom said she would handle the details. The week of my birthday, I found out that Emeric had a regional basketball tournament on the exact same day. Not just the same weekend, the same day. My parents did not cancel my party. They just did not show up to it. They dropped me off at the house with a store-bought cake and a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter that said, "Happy birthday, honey," in my mom's handwriting. Then they drove 40 miles to watch Emeric play basketball. 3 of my friends came. We sat in the living room and watched a movie and ate cake, and nobody said anything about the fact that my parents were not there. I was 10. I smiled through the whole thing because I did not know yet that I was allowed to feel anything else. When I was 15, I brought home a GPA of 3.9 and a letter saying I had been selected for the district honors academic program. I walked in the front door holding that letter, and my parents were in the kitchen getting ready for a dinner. They had planned to celebrate Emeric being accepted onto the varsity football team. I put the letter on the table. My mom said, "That's great, sweetie," and went back to stirring something on the stove. The letter sat on that table for 4 days before I picked it up and put it in my own room. When I was 17, I made the citywide debate team. It was competitive, not everyone got in. I had worked for it for 2 years. The regional qualifier happened to fall on the same weekend my parents had already committed to traveling to watch Emeric play in an out-of-state game. They gave me $15 for a taxi and a text message that said, "Do your best." I did. We placed second in the city. Nobody in my family asked how it went. I want to be careful here not to make it sound like my childhood was nothing but pain, because that is not the whole truth either. There were regular dinners and Christmas mornings and vacations to Michigan every other summer. But there is a difference between a family that exists and a family that sees you, and mine only ever really saw one of us. By the time I was 18 and choosing a college, I was not running away. That is too dramatic a word for what I was doing. I was just choosing a place where I could take up space without having to fight for it. Louisville, Kentucky, was 312 miles from Naperville, far enough that nobody expected me home every weekend, close enough that I could still call it nearby when my parents asked why I chose it. Louisville was the first place I ever felt like my own person. My professors learned my name. My classmates asked my opinion. I had a roommate named Verity who actually listened when I talked. I joined an economics study group, and people showed up to meet with me specifically. These are small things, but when you have spent 18 years being small in your own home, small things feel enormous. I went home for holidays. I kept things civil. I did not bring up the tournament or the letter or the debate competition, because I had already accepted that bringing it up would only result in being told I was too sensitive or that I was remembering things wrong. So I kept my mouth shut and I kept my distance, and I told myself that was enough. And then Emeric came home from overseas, and everything I had quietly accepted came back up all at once. Emeric had been serving in the military for 2 years. He was stationed overseas for most of that time. I knew he was coming back sometime in the fall because my mom had mentioned it a few times in passing during our short phone calls. She never said a specific date. She never asked if I wanted to plan anything or be involved in any way. I assumed things were just being figured out and that someone would tell me when there was something to know. 6 weeks before the event, I started getting occasional texts from my mom. Things like Emeric is so excited to be coming home, and it is going to be so good to have the family together. I read those texts and responded normally. I did not ask follow-up questions because nothing in her tone suggested there was information being withheld. I was in the middle of finals preparation, and I was not thinking about much beyond my coursework. The discovery happened on a Tuesday night. I was sitting on my bed scrolling through Facebook while Verity was at the library. My Aunt Darlene, my dad's younger sister, had posted a photo of a printed invitation. It was the kind you order from a stationery shop, cream-coloured with gold lettering. The caption said she could not wait to welcome Emeric home and that the whole family was going to be there. She had tagged several people in the post. I was not tagged. I looked at the invitation in the photo more carefully. There was a date, a time, a venue, a restaurant in Naperville that my family went to for special occasions, and there was a list of names at the bottom of the invitation, the kind that says reserved for and lists the guests. I could read most of the names in the photo. I went through them one by one. My mom, my dad, Aunt Darlene, Uncle Robbie, my cousins Fletcher and Nora, my grandparents on my dad's side, several names I recognized as family friends. I read the list 3 times. My name was not there. I sat with that for a few minutes, not panicking, not crying, just reading it again to make sure I was not misreading something. I was not. My name was simply absent, no Vader, just a list of people who were going to celebrate my brother's return, and I was not one of them. I called my mom first. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I told her I had seen Darlene's post. There was a pause, then she said, "Oh, that." Another pause, then, "You know how it is, Vader. This one is really just for the immediate family and close family friends." I asked her to explain what that meant given that I was her daughter. She said, "You always make things more complicated than they need to be. Just let Emeric have his moment." I asked if anyone had considered telling me about this beforehand rather than letting me find out on Facebook. She said things got busy. Then she said she had to go and ended the call. I waited 10 minutes and called my dad. He picked up right away, which surprised me. I told him the same thing, that I had seen the Facebook post, that my name was not on the invitation, and that I wanted to understand why. He did not pause. He went straight to, "What is your problem? It is just a family reunion. You are making this into something it is not." I told him I was not making anything into anything. I was simply asking a direct question. His voice went up a level. "You always do this. You always have to make everything uncomfortable with that attitude of yours. Emeric just got back. Let him have something nice without you turning it into a scene." I did not raise my voice. I said, "I am not turning anything into a scene. I am asking why I was not invited to my own brother's welcome home party." He said, "Because it is not your party, it is for him." And then he said again, slower this time, "You always make everything harder than it needs to be." I said okay, and I hung up. Verity came back from the library about an hour later and found me sitting on the floor next to my bed going through my phone. Not crying, not texting anyone, just sitting. She put her bag down and sat across from me without asking anything, which was the right thing to do. After a few minutes I told her what happened. I told her about the Facebook post, the call with my mom, the call with my dad. I told her what he said about my attitude. Verity listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "So what do you want to do? Not they are wrong or I cannot believe them. Just what do you want to do?" And that question was exactly what I needed, because it put the decision back in my hands instead of centering the conversation on what my parents had done. I thought about it for about 30 seconds, then I said, "I want to go somewhere." Verity nodded slowly and said, "I have been saying we need a trip since September." She pulled up her laptop. I texted Imrise, a friend from our economics class, and asked if he was free the same weekend as the party. He said he had no plans. Within 2 hours, the three of us had found a cabin on a rental site in Aspen, Colorado, split the cost 3 ways, and booked round-trip flights out of Louisville. I did not send my parents a message telling them what I was doing. I did not feel the need to explain myself. For the first time in a long time, I made a decision purely based on what I wanted, and that felt like enough. The flight from Louisville to Denver was 2 hours and 20 minutes. From Denver, we drove a rental car about 160 miles up into the mountains to Aspen. By the time we got to the cabin, it was late afternoon and the air was cold enough that I could see my breath. I had never been to Colorado before. I had never seen mountains that close. I am not going to make a big poetic moment out of it, because that is not what this story is about. What I will say is that standing outside the cabin in that cold air, knowing that my family was 3 states away preparing for a party I was not invited to, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not healed, just looser. The first morning, we rented gear from a shop at the base of the mountain and signed up for a group beginner lesson. Emrise had skied once before in high school. Verity had never skied. I had never skied. The instructor for our group was a young woman named Petra who had the patience of someone who had taught complete beginners for years. She got us through the basics on flat ground and then moved us to a very gentle slope. Emrise found his footing faster than either of us. Verity fell twice in the first 15 minutes and laughed both times. I fell 4 times and did not laugh, but I also did not quit. By the afternoon of the first day, I could get down the beginner slope without falling. It was not graceful, but I stayed upright and that counted for something. On the second day, I went out without Petra's group lesson and tried a slightly steeper section of the beginner area on my own. I was about halfway down, moving too fast and leaning the wrong direction, when I heard someone call out from behind me. I stopped badly by falling sideways into the snow. When I looked up, there was a man a few years older than me, maybe 26 or 27, standing a few feet away. He identified himself as one of the resort's on-slope instructors, someone who worked outside the structured lesson program and helped skiers who were working on technique in real time. His name was Farron. He said my weight distribution was off and that I was leaning back when I needed to be pressing forward into my boots. He showed me the correction once slowly. I tried it on the next short section of slope, and the difference was immediate and obvious. I told him it worked. He said it usually does. We talked for a few minutes about how long I had been there and where I was from. He was originally from Vermont but had been working in Aspen for 3 years. He asked if I was enjoying the trip. I said yes, and I meant it, which surprised me a little given everything that was sitting in the back of my mind. Farron went back to his work on the slope. I went back to practicing. But I thought about that conversation for the rest of the afternoon, in the specific way you think about something when you are not sure why it is staying with you. My phone had been getting notifications the whole day. I checked it that evening in the cabin after dinner. There were 3 missed calls from my mom, 2 from my dad, and a text from my Aunt Darlene asking if I was all right. I read through them. I did not respond to any of them. That was not something I did lightly. I am not the kind of person who ignores calls from my family as a habit. But that evening, I made a deliberate choice to set the phone face down on the nightstand and stay present in the cabin, in that conversation with Verity and Emrise, in that trip that I had chosen for myself. Verity noticed I had put the phone down without responding and did not say anything about it. Emrise, who knew the general outline of why I had wanted to take this trip in the first place, also stayed quiet. We played cards for 2 hours. I went to bed later than usual and slept better than I had in weeks. On the 3rd morning in Aspen, I woke up to a text from my mom sent at 6:47 in the morning. It said, "Emeric did not show up last night. We cannot reach him. Do you know where he is?" I read it twice. The party had been the night before. My brother, the entire reason for that party, had not appeared. I sat up in bed and read the message again. Then there was another one from my dad sent 20 minutes later. "Vader, have you talked to your brother recently? Let us know if you hear from him." The fact that my father was now asking me if I knew where Emeric was, after telling me days earlier that the party was none of my business, was not something I had the energy to address in that moment. I set the phone down and got dressed. I told Verity over breakfast that my brother had apparently not shown up to his own welcome home party. She raised her eyebrows. Emrise said, "That is a lot to happen on your ski trip," which was the right amount of understatement for the situation. I checked my email while Verity and Emrise went to return their rental gear. My inbox had a few things from school and one promotional email I ignored. I went into my spam folder for a reason I cannot fully explain, maybe instinct, maybe just restlessness. And there it was, an email from Emeric's personal address, sent 4 days earlier, flagged as spam by my email provider. The subject line was just my name. He had written that he found out about 2 weeks ago that I had not been invited to the party. He had not known until he was going through logistics with my mom over a shared phone account they had set up for international calls, and he saw a message thread where my mom and aunt were discussing the guest list. My name came up in that thread, specifically in the context of a decision that had been made to not include me because, according to what he read, my presence would make Emeric uncomfortable with family tension. He said he confronted my mom about it, and she told him I had a habit of making family events difficult, and that it was better this way. He wrote that he did not believe that. He wrote one sentence that I read 4 times standing in that cabin kitchen. I do not know when they decided this was okay, but I want you to know that I do not think it is. He asked if we could talk before he flew back to Chicago. He said he was currently in Denver finishing a few things and that he had not booked his return flight yet. I called him immediately. He picked up on the second ring. The conversation started quietly. He asked where I was and I told him Aspen. He did not seem surprised that I had gone somewhere. He explained again what he had seen in the message thread and how he had pushed back on my mom and been dismissed. He said he had thought about just going to the party and confronting it in person, but when he thought about sitting at that table knowing what he knew about why I was absent, he could not make himself do it. So he had stayed in Denver. He had not told my parents where he was or why. I asked him why he had never reached out before about any of this, the years of it, not just this one event. He was quiet for a moment, and then said that he had not understood it when it was happening, and that when he was older and did understand it, he did not know how to bring it up without it becoming a whole thing that would blow apart the family. I told him I understood that even if it had cost me something. He said he knew. We stayed on the phone without talking for a little while. Not an uncomfortable silence, just 2 people sitting with something that had been a long time coming. Then he asked if he could drive up to Aspen. I said yes. He arrived 4 hours later. I met him outside the cabin. We had not seen each other in almost 2 years. He looked tired from the drive but otherwise the same. We went inside, sat down at the table and Verity made coffee. Emrise introduced himself and then took Verity to the other end of the cabin so Emeric and I could talk without an audience. We talked for 3 hours, not about the party specifically, about all of it, about the birthday when our parents went to his game, about the honors letter on the kitchen table, about the debate tournament. I had not told him about any of those things and he listened to all of them without interrupting. At one point he said, I did not know about most of this. I told him I believed him. He said I should have paid more attention. I told him that he was a kid too, and that it was not his job to fix what our parents were doing. That part of the conversation was the hardest for me to get through, not because I was angry at him, but because I had spent so many years assuming that if my own brother did not notice, it must not have been as real as it felt. Having him sit across from me and say he wished he had paid more attention made it feel real in a way it had not before. The night Emeric arrived, after Verity and Emrise had gone to bed, we sat in the small living area of the cabin and Emeric said he thought we should call our parents together. I asked him what he expected to get from that. He said he did not expect an apology. He just thought they needed to hear from both of us at the same time, because they had spent years being able to manage us separately, and he wanted them to understand that was not going to work anymore. I agreed. We put the call on speaker and set the phone on the table between us. My dad answered. He was clearly still awake, which meant the situation with Emeric's disappearance had not resolved in a way that let anyone sleep. When he heard Emeric's voice, he said, "Where are you? We have been trying to reach you." Emeric said he was in Aspen with me. My dad went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Why?" Emeric said he did not come to the party because he knew I had not been invited and he did not think that was right. My dad's first response was, "This again." His second response was that Emeric was letting me get in his head and that I always did this, made myself the center of something that was not about me. Emeric said calmly that the question he wanted answered was a simple one. What was the reasoning behind the decision to exclude me from the guest list? My dad said it was not a big deal and that we were both overreacting. Then my mom's voice came on. She had been listening on another phone in the house, which I had not expected. She said that she had not invited me because she knew I would arrive with a bad attitude and make the evening tense, and she had wanted Emeric to be able to enjoy his first night home without conflict. Emeric said he had just driven 4 hours to sit in a cabin in Aspen rather than attend the party they threw in his name, and asked if that told her something about whether her plan had worked. I spoke for the first time in the call at that point. I said I had never, at any family event, deliberately created conflict. I said that if there had been tension at previous events, it was not because I showed up looking for it. I said that I had not been told I was not invited. I had found out from a Facebook photo taken of a printed invitation that was circulated to family members. And I said that the fact that no one had thought to simply speak to me directly, to pick up the phone and have a conversation, said more about the situation than anything else. My dad said I was being dramatic. Emeric said quietly but very clearly, "I am not coming home until we can sit down together and talk about this in person, all 4 of us." There was a long pause. My mom said she thought that was unnecessary. Emeric said he disagreed. The call ended without any resolution, but something had shifted. They knew we were together. They knew we had talked. They knew the 2 of us were no longer operating in separate lanes. 3 days later, the day before Verity and Imrise flew back to Louisville, Emeric and I drove down to Denver. Our parents had driven in from Chicago about 4.5 hours. We met at a sit-down restaurant that Emeric had chosen, neutral ground, a place none of us had any history with. My dad arrived looking like a man who had decided before walking in the door that he was going to say as little as possible. My mom looked like she had not slept well. We sat down and ordered food, and for the first 15 minutes nobody said the thing we were all there to say. My mom spoke first. She said that she knew she had put more focus on Emeric over the years because he had needed it more, that boys were harder to raise, that she had not meant for me to feel left out. It was not a full accounting of everything that had happened. It was not close to an apology in any complete sense, but it was the first time she had said out loud that there had been a difference in how she treated us, and I noted that. My dad did not say anything equivalent during the meal, but at the end, when I pushed back my chair to stand up, he reached over and put his hand briefly on the table near mine, not touching, just near, and said, "If there is something coming up with the family, I will let you know ahead of time." It was a small thing. I did not know whether to believe it would actually happen, but I wrote it down in my memory because it was more than he had offered before. Before we left the restaurant, Emeric told our parents directly that if family events continued to operate the way this one had, with one of us included and one excluded, he would not be attending them. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten anything. He just stated it as plainly as he would state any other fact. My mom looked at the table. My dad looked at Emeric. Neither of them argued. I said one thing on my way out. I looked at my dad and said, "I do not need things to be perfect. I just need to be thought of when it matters." He did not respond, but he heard it. 3 months after Aspen, Emeric called me on a Wednesday evening and told me he had been accepted to a graduate program at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. He asked how I felt about that. I told him I thought it was a good decision. Lexington is about an hour's drive from Louisville, close enough to see each other regularly, but far enough that we were still living our own lives. He moved to Kentucky 6 weeks after that call. We started getting together most weekends. Sometimes I drove to Lexington, sometimes he came to Louisville. We would get breakfast or watch a game or sit in a parking lot with coffee and talk for an hour about nothing in particular. I want to be accurate about what this relationship looked like, because I do not want to overstate it. It was not easy in a seamless way. There were moments where we did not know what to say to each other, years of distance that could not be covered in a few Saturdays. There were times we sat in the car and neither of us talked for a while, but it was honest, and that mattered more to me than smooth. My parents did not transform into different people. I want to be clear about that too. My mom still talked about Emeric more than about me when I called. My dad still had the habit of saying very little, but there were small, specific changes. On my 22nd birthday, my dad called me before noon. He did not text. He called. He said happy birthday and asked if I was doing anything to celebrate. That had never happened before. My mom, a few weeks after Denver, asked me during a call what I wanted to eat if I came home for Thanksgiving, specifically asked me, not just said, "Come home." These were not grand gestures. They were just signs that something small had shifted, and I was willing to accept small shifts as real ones. Farron texted me about a week after I got back to Louisville. He said he hoped the rest of the trip had been good and asked if I had made it home without issue. I said I had. We ended up talking on the phone a few days later and then again after that. He mentioned he had a ski instruction workshop scheduled in Lexington in the spring, which meant he would be in Kentucky for a few weeks. I told him I was in Louisville, about an hour away. He said he knew. I did not read too much into that, but I also did not read into it. We kept talking. I did not know where it was going and I did not need to know yet. What I knew was that I had met him because I chose to go on that trip, and I had gone on that trip because I chose myself when someone else decided I was not worth including. That choice was mine. Here is what I know now that I did not fully know before all of this happened. The family you are born into gets to define a lot of things in your early life. They decide what is celebrated and what is ignored. They decide whose name goes on the invitation and whose does not. For a long time I thought that meant they also got to define me, but they do not. And the moment I stopped trying to fit into a guest list that was never going to have my name on it and started writing my own plans, things changed. Not perfectly, not all at once, but they changed. My name was not on that invitation, but every decision I have made since then has been mine to make. And that is worth more than any party. If you have ever been left out of something by the people who were supposed to always include you, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what that felt like, or what you did about it. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you had to stop waiting for someone to choose you and just choose yourself? I read every comment and I want to know your story too. If this video reached you in some way, please give it a like. It takes 1 second and it means more than you know. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they are allowed to walk away and choose themselves. And if you are not subscribed yet, please do, because I share stories like this one regularly, stories about real life, real family, real decisions, and what happens after. Thank you for being here and for listening all the way to the end. I hope whatever you are carrying feels a little lighter today.